And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dylan Pulvermacher, who during his near-death experience encountered a being covered in light, and today we're going to learn about it. Dylan, thank you for joining me, and welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, Dylan, if you don't mind, can we start either on the day that it happened, or do you need to give us a little bit of backstory first?
I'll give you a little bit of backstory because not a lot of people would understand like how I got into the position. So what I'll explain to you is when I was younger, I was a very sick child. It turned out my parents didn't realize until I was a little bit older that I was born deaf in my right ear. And I was born deaf in my right ear because the ear canal was developed upside down. Well, due to the canal being developed upside down, I couldn't hear the sound. There was a membrane that's normally on the bottom that was at the top. And what happened is that membrane wore through somehow, and the bacteria was getting into the brain, and the spinal fluid was actually leaking out. And it within a matter of hours, I became deathly ill. And that's how this all came to be. So I guess just to let you know, it was a form of what they considered spinal meningitis with the birth defect. So when I was young, I remember the night, and I'll start off in the evening where I was in bed. I woke up and I was deathly ill. I was weak. I was running. I don't even know what kind of fever. I was between, I believe, the age of 4 to 6. I don't remember the exact date now that I'm older. I didn't keep track of that. I just remember the experience better than anything. And I was sick. I threw up. I couldn't hardly move. I crawled out of the bed. I was trying to get to my parents' room, which was across the hall, and I could barely move. I could barely get moving. I could just barely crawl. I made it over to the heat register because I was so cold because my fever was so high, and I just curled into a ball. And I remember everything hurting, and I was trying to call out. I couldn't speak. And then I kind of closed my eyes and started to doze off. And when I did that, I what I would call either a hallucination or an angel or something in the form of my 2 best friends came up and started tapping me on the shoulder. And the one I started dozing off, and I felt the tap, and it was Dylan, hey, we're going to go get your parents. And I literally watched them walk over into my parents' room, which I wasn't strong enough to walk through the doorway in the hallway and go. And then I closed my eyes and started to fall asleep. And then my other best friend came and tapped on me and said the same thing, like, hey, Dylan, it's okay. We're going to go get your parents. We're going to wake them up. You're going to be okay. And that happened a couple of times. And as I was laying there, basically, starting to lose conscious, the room was spinning. It looked like everything was going to fall over on me. I tensed tighter into a ball, and then it all went away instantly. Like everything I was thinking, all the pain in my body, the weight on my shoulders from, being that tense and everything, and that curled up, just all went away instantly. And I remember like all the thoughts, all the worries, everything that, the mind creates, as I've learned now as I get older, was just gone instantly. And there's this beautiful, bright white light. It was surrounding, it was encompassing. And when I was in that light, I met a person, whether it was, my higher self or Jesus or, angelic being. And they told me that it was not my time yet, that I had something that I had to come back to do. And that, my life had a purpose. It had something I was supposed to do. And being so young and, I couldn't even comprehend what was happening because of how sick I was when I left. And then the feeling that overcame me when I was in that warm white light was just, I didn't want to come back. I was very content with all the, pain and feeling and the weight of the world and everything being gone. And when I came back, I remember like hesitant, like I didn't want to go back, but they were very insistent that I had something to do. And so I remember being almost sad. Like I didn't want to leave that. I didn't want to leave that place. Everything about it felt right. I really don't know how to say it other than that at this point in my life. It really felt right. It felt very peaceful, very like a home like I've never known. And when I was in that space, the look the person gave me, whoever it was, just let me know that everything was going to be all right. And then I woke up in the hospital the next day, and that's when they let me know that, what had happened, and then what they had to do from there to actually fix the problem. And that I was very lucky to be alive, because I guess not a lot of people, survive spinal meningitis and can walk and talk and ride a bicycle and such, let alone, to the degree I had it and the surgery I had to have to correct it. And that was my first near-death experience. And after that, the whole world was painted a different color. Like, as a kid, I didn't grow up in a rich home. I didn't grow up what I would call, what some people would mentally call privileged. I grew up in a house that wasn't totally in poverty, but also was not rich. I'd grow up in what I considered a lower vibrationary field. But after I came back, I didn't see things the same. Nothing's the same. Like, when you go to the other side and come back, it's not the same, because then you're aware, or at least I personally am aware from my experience, that there is something greater than this, like this experience on this earth, this planet. And that was my first near-death experience, which changed everything. It changed the way I looked at TV. It changed the way I looked at growing up, money, everything as a child. It just had me start asking questions of what and why. A lot of the adults around me couldn't give me answers, because I would ask them questions and they just didn't know how to answer. And, being born in 1980, I didn't have the internet right away to, reach out to people and stuff like that. We were surfing through the card catalog if you wanted to read a book such. And anybody I tried really sharing it with when I was younger just thought I was nuts. There wasn't like the people speaking about it like they are now so openly, which I'm very grateful for, because I realized that I'm not alone in this experience.
Dylan, thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever talk to your parents and ask them how they woke up and found you?
I never did that. I still to this day don't know. And I know my best friends weren't in the house.
Right.
They weren't there. That much I know. I was sleeping in bed. They weren't there. So how my parents woke up and found me, I don't know. I just remember watching them walk into the room and saying they were going to get them. And then it almost like repeating every time I started to I would guess lose consciousness or whatever. So who that was, whether it was, beings that my mind were perceiving as my best friends because they were trying to help me. And in, the conscious realm of seeing things versus the unconscious realm, I guess they're different. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who or what that was, but I remember I remember the tap on the shoulder as I was curled in that little ball, very, very vividly.
Can you describe for us what the being looked like?
He had, I would say, like a Caucasian male, and he had like a longer hair, some facial hair, and piercing eyes. There was no lie. There was no doubt. There was nothing emanating from that person other than love, understanding, and a firm sense of direction that was like unshakable. When he told me I had to come back, it wasn't like they were trying to punish me. It was just like, no, this is not your time. You have some things you have to still go and accomplish. And it was very warm and comforting, even though I just wanted to stay. I mean, in my childhood life, I was sick a lot, and it would let over the ears and stuff before they found out what it was and why it was happening. I had tubes and stuff when I was younger. So my whole childhood I was sick a lot, and it was pretty rough. And then to have that kind of experience where you go from a rough childhood of always being sick and then going through and passing over and then coming back, it was a jolt. It was a huge jolt.
It kind of sounds like you're describing Jesus, but I don't think the being ever identified himself. So you're not sure,
No.
Right?
No, just a warm smile and an understanding, and the eyes didn't lie. I guess I would say that, they say if you want to see a person, look into their soul, look into their eyes, and it'll tell you a lot about them.
Have you discovered what your purpose is?
Yeah, I was like, in the last 4 years, I'm starting to understand it. And I know that might sound kind of weird that it like took that long after having 3 near-death experiences, but I believe my purpose after just kind of going through life, seeing things differently, always kind of being an outcast, was to definitely help people. I'm very good at talking with people and walking them through certain things, helping them see the better part of themselves. I've always had a gift and a knack for that. And just working with people to better themselves, better their environments, better their, their thinking capabilities from a lower vibration thinking to a higher vibration thinking.
All right, well, let's move on to your second NDE.
Okay. My second near-death experience, I was around 10 years old. I had just gotten into an argument with my brother, and as siblings, we fought. I had one older brother, 2 younger sisters, and I went to hop on my bike to just leave. And I didn't realize that my bike, because my brother and his friend had taken, his bike and my bike out because his friend didn't have a bike, so he just rode my bike. He had got cut off by somebody and the bike was messed up. Well, they didn't tell me that. They just leaned it up against a tree. So when I got on the bike and started to head out the driveway, I realized there's something majorly wrong with the bike. I wasn't paying really good attention and just kind of went out into the road. And, I don't remember exactly what happened or where I was in the road at the time, but I got hit by a guy going about 45 miles an hour. I had no helmet or anything on. I dead gripped the bike with my left hand, and I went up into the windshield of the car. I got thrown out onto the road. My neighbor came out and, tried to help me because I was cut and hurt pretty bad. And then I remember getting to the hospital and feeling sick. And they were talking about surgery. And I really honestly don't remember going into surgery or anything like that. I just remember going back over to the other side. And then I was talking to, I believe, the same guy again, same warm feeling and everything. And I was back there. And then that was like, okay, I'm here again. And I knew where I was. It was very familiar, very warm, very comforting. And they were like, no, you got to go back again. You still have something you have to do. And at this point, already being there once and coming back and seeing everything differently, and then I was back there again, I wasn't as frustrated this time because it was a really, really, really comforting feeling once again. And I was just trying to, like, while I was there, I remember I was trying to just like make sense of it, but trying to make sense of something when you're somewhere else and coming back and making sense of it, you can only get so far with it. But I just remember the feeling like everything's going to be okay. You have a purpose and you're going to get there. And it was, second time I came back, I woke up, I was in the hospital. I had a lot of lacerations, on my leg, my head, my arms. I dislocated my shoulder from pulling the bike up on. And I went back to school again. And then once again, I really didn't see things the same. Like, I'd left twice now and I'm only like 10 years old. And I went back to school and things just really weren't the same. I didn't want to be in school anymore. I didn't see a purpose to it.
I noticed that you used the word they in this experience and the previous one, even though you only recount seeing one being. Were there other beings?
Yeah, there was one main being that was, communicating with me, but there were people all around me. There's just one face that stood out very predominantly. And I guess I could have clarified that. Thank you for asking. Yeah, there were people all around, but only one stepped forward and made the face come into contact, as I remember, to say what they, had to say. I say they, I guess there's not really a lot of talking that happens with the other side. It's more of telepathic. So when I say they, I could feel all of them. And then it just, I don't know if it's so I could comprehend it that one came forward and talked instead of all of them talking.
Did you get a sense of who they were?
Just people that loved and cared. Like there was no like, oh, this person is George Washington or this person is that. It was just, man, over there, there's no discrimination. There's no hate. It's just open arms and love and light in a way that to put into words would limit what it is. really.
Do you recall your surroundings? Like, were you just in light, like being inside of a cloud? Or were you like somewhere physical?
No, it was just like, yeah, it was like a big white area. It was limitless. It was all encompassing, but limitless. It was just a big white area. And then, the one that I spoke with came forward, and they're the ones that were behind him, but they were still all around, not like to be intrusive, but to let me know that they were there. So that's, I guess, why I would say they. But I really only spoke with the one person, if you will.
Well, let's move forward to the third one. And
Okay.
then I may have questions that kind of encompass all three.
Okay. My third one was when I was 15, like 14 into 15. I'm pretty sure it's 15. I got into a vehicle accident and was severely injured. And they flight for life me from one hospital down to Freighter, Milwaukee, a pretty big hospital branch. And I lost consciousness there. And I went back to the other side again. And this time they said I had a choice. I remember that very clearly, that I could have stayed or that I could go and, finish what I was supposed to do. But like this time, it wasn't like I had to stay or I had to go. Same being again. And he was very, very like, the choice is yours at this point, which part of me really wanted to stay and part of me really wanted to go and finish what I was supposed to do. Like, this is my third time being on the other side and back. And I remember I made a decision to come back because it was like they were so persistent twice, and I still had not seen what this was. Like, I lived through spinal meningitis, which should have killed me. I got hit on my bicycle and my head went through a windshield of a car, and that didn't kill me. And now, I got in a really bad car accident and I was pretty broke up, and they were like, no, you can go back and finish what you were supposed to do. So I remember saying to him, like, all right, I'll go back. And then, coming back into my body. And that was kind of a hard jolt because this last time I was really, really, really banged up. And I was coming out of surgery, and I'll never forget this. I don't remember what was said to me, but what was happening was I was getting wheeled down the hallway on the gurney. Like, right when you come out of surgery, they wheel you into a room to, let the anesthesia wear off and for you to wake up. And when I was in the hallway coming back to consciousness, there's this guy on my right-hand side, and he kept saying to me, my eyes were closed, I was still asleep. He said, you got to wake up and tell this person this. She's right there on your right. You got to tell her this. You got to tell her this. You got to tell her this now. You got to tell her it's from me. And I opened my eyes, looked right at her, said whatever he wanted me to repeat. They all stopped pushing the gurney. She backed up. She burst out into tears and took off. And I passed back out because I wasn't supposed to be awake yet. And then she ended up being my nurse as I was recovering from the surgery. And she told me the message that I gave her was from her fiance, who had passed away a little while earlier. They never got to get married because he had some kind of condition that, made him pass on. And the message was from him. And she took very, very good care of me. And to this day, I still don't remember exactly what I spoke because of, coming in and out of anesthesia. But I remember her reaction plain as day. I remember them all just stopping, pushing the gurney, her face, the way she started crying and ran off. And then, she told me that the message I had to say, she didn't repeat what I said. And I didn't ask because, I was hurt pretty bad. I was mending, and it was still quite all shocking to me. And then after the third NED, I really didn't want to go back to school. I really felt that a lot of what everybody was telling me that I needed to do with my life was not what I needed to do with my life. It was not fitting. It was not filling class, school, learn to do what you need to do to make it in society. I started to question society. I started to question pretty much everything after that third one. And then years went by, me not understanding. And then now that I'm in, my 40s, I'm really starting to see things differently with a light. And I think part of me having those experiences was so I could see things differently, so I could be where I am now.
Have you noticed after any of your NDEs that you had any new abilities, like perhaps talking to dead people, kind of like how you had contact with this guy?
When I was younger, there were a lot of paranormal activities in my house. And as I got older, as far as like seeing them and whatnot, when I was at a younger age, I could see them plain as day all around the house and stuff. I could hear them. And then when I got to a certain age, it was too much. And then that kind of went away. I mean, I'm still aware when they're around, when they're present. I can feel that. I can sense that. But I don't hear or see them anymore. Maybe out of the corner of my eye every once in a while, I'll catch a peripheral and I'll have the feeling and I'll be like, okay, that's what that is. Or I'll some places I've been to, you can just clearly hear footsteps walking in a door close and there's no one else in the building. And it's like, okay, I can accept that. But I don't have the sense as strong as I did when I was younger.
Have you noticed any other abilities that you have afterwards?
Reading people, if I and I don't know if this is from childhood on or if this is something that came with the NEDs, but if I spend enough time with person and I take their hands, I can actually, like photographs, I can pull memory images from their mind and talk to them about them. And I've done this with a handful of people, and I guess I've been very, very accurate. Most people don't want to admit how accurate I am. And that's not to brag or anything. That's just saying that I hold their hand and I start to get images, and then all of a sudden I'll just start speaking of the images and like, how old they were, or what it was, or anything like that.
Do you find yourself thinking about your NDEs often, or do you think about them all the time like you can't escape them?
I wouldn't say I think about them all the time or can't escape them. I just cannot escape the awakening of the different perspective. It's like once you open that jar and you see things that way, you cannot, like they say, once you put the glasses on, you cannot unsee things, but you can't also make anyone else wear the glasses. And that's pretty much what it's been for me, is just always seeing things differently. Like I can be told that, everything is, square like this. And I'll be like, well, not quite, because I can always see a different perspective. So if anything, I would say it definitely gave me a wide range of perspective in life. And definitely helped me not be so judgmental.
If you recall your NDEs, is it possible it was more real on that side than this side?
Define real.
Maybe I should put it as in, this is the dream and over there is real life.
I would say so.
All right.
I would say so, because nothing there was fake. No one, the energy that came forward, the people that came forward, there was nothing but sincerity and love from them. Where people on earth right now can come up to you and say, oh, I mean all this, and then their actions show that they really don't, or they don't know how to follow through what they say they mean. Where on the other side, there was no doubt about what was being said. There was no question about motive. There was nothing like that.
Have you told your friends and family about these experiences? And if so, how did they react?
Believe it or not, it took years to talk to my sisters about this. And then I found out that, like with the house we grew up in, that they had a lot of the same experiences I did with like the paranormal. And that helped me not feel so crazy. Because when I started talking about like the car or the lady in the attic, they both knew exactly what I was talking about. And they were both kind of like relieved, like, oh, okay, that stuff did happen. I'm not the only one that saw that. But as children, we just never spoke to each other about it. It wasn't until about 5-6 years ago that I sat down and talked with both my sisters about it, and they're pretty understanding. As far as like my mom and stepdad, I remember trying to talk to my mom a little bit about my near-death experience, And the one entity I saw in the house right around the age of 10, and she just would not hear any of it. She kind of said that some things happened in the house before my brother was born, the oldest, and brought home, but other than that, she just kind of like dismissed all of it. As far as the rest of my friends and stuff, I shared with who I can, but a lot in my circle of friends at the time really weren't ready or comfortable to hear something like that. So it's not something you just want to go to a round table and say over dinner. You know, you got to know that your audience is open to hearing something like that, because they might not be in the place of their own spiritual journey, or they might have had something like that they're totally repressing, and they're not ready to have that cup of tea.
What do you think inspires you about your NDEs?
Inspires me? I guess the biggest thing that would inspire me is I'm not afraid of dying. Like everybody that got so afraid during the last 2 years about dying, I'm not afraid about dying. That's part of the cycle. I've been there 3 times now. I can tell you with certainty that from my experience that there's something way better and way better, depending on where you're at in your journey and where you resonate at the time of your death. There's levels to everything. And I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I'm just more afraid of not living an authentic life to myself.
What other paranormal things have happened to you during your life?
When I was young, there was a lot of paranormal experience in my house. Lots. As a kid, I'd always see this car. It would pull in the driveway, and it usually be when it's like at night, storming out sometimes, or just sometimes at night. I would hear the rumble of a V8, and it had fins, like a late 50s Plymouth or Cadillac with the big fins. And I remember as a kid, I would see it and I'd say something to my mom, and my mom would always tell me there's no car, but I would hear the rumble of that car pull in the driveway and just idle around the back and park. And I saw this car over and over and over again. And I was very insistent on it, but my mom always told me there was no car. And like I said, until a few years ago, me and my siblings didn't talk about it. Then both my sisters were like, yeah, the car. And my one sister jumped in and was like, the car with the fins. And I had not described that to her yet. So it was like, okay, I'm not the only one that saw that. And then there was a lady that stayed in the attic most of the time in the house I lived in. And she'd always peer out the window and look at us. Like during the day, I could just look up and I'd see her in the attic looking down at me. But as a child, I thought, oh, there's just somebody in the attic. But you'd say something to my mom, being my parents, and they'd be like, no, that's not there. You're not seeing that. The strongest paranormal thing I had was one night my friends came over and they were staying the night, and I woke up late at night, and I swear I heard my mom say, because I turned up in bed and put my feet on the floor. I swear I heard my mom say, go back to bed. Because we were kids, and anytime we'd start making noise, she knew we weren't sleeping and would just holler up the stairs for us to go back to bed and stop being kids, stop playing. And right after she did that, I put my feet on the floor and I looked straight out the hallway because the door was open, and this lady in a Victorian style dress, floating about a foot up off the floor, turned and looked at me, and she had no eyes; they were just black, and she was in a flowing purplish blue color. And she just stared and locked eyes with me dead on. And I could not move. I was frozen. I couldn't reach to wake my friend up. I couldn't speak. And then she just went right down the hallway and floated away. That was probably one of the, aware and like at 10 of like ghosts and stuff, where it was unmistakable. There was no like, oh, the lights played a trick on me or something like that. I don't even know how you'd make that happen. In Hollywood status, but I remember that very, very clear. There was always bangings and knockings in the house. When I was younger, I'd always think that I heard a lady like falling down the stairs into the basement, and she'd be crying for help. And that's something else I talked to my sisters about, and they both heard it. And it turns out when my parents bought the house, they had taken the staircase out that went down to that point and turned it into a pantry. So on the wall, you could see the stains of the stair treads from it being a wood burning house on the wall that went down, but there were no stairs there anymore. But as a child, I always thought I heard somebody falling down the stairs and being in some kind of pain. And that's something else I talked to my sisters about. And they're like, yeah, we heard that too. And often, and there were just a lot of sounds, noises, bangs, feelings, different encounters of, I swear I'd hear somebody talking, but then there was no one home. And a lot of that went on for a lot of my childhood.
Did you live in a really old house?
Yes. Yeah, it was built in, I think, 1910. It was a 3-story farmhouse. So, yeah, it was an old house, and supposedly it had some history. I don't know all of it. I didn't look into all of it, but supposedly it did. But, yeah, that's what I grew up and lived in, was an old 3-story farmhouse, turn of the century.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely.
What's the best way to reach you?
I would say probably email at grrd26@gmail.com.
All right, Dylan. Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
In my belief, this is a life experience. From what I understand now, what I believe, we all come here to experience the separation and duality and find ourselves again. And in this experience, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be all sorts of parts of it. But that's part of the experience. How you frame your mind and how you see it is how your experience is going to go for you. And if you're afraid because you have some terminal cancer, or if you're afraid of dying, just know that that's another part of the journey, and that our being, our essence never dies, it never goes away. And I believe solely that our world is headed to a newer age, and it's going to be a lot more beautiful and a lot more brighter. But right now, as they say, the night is always the thickest just before the dawn. So hang in there. If you got anything, if you have questions, feel free to email me. More than willing to chat.
Dylan, thank you for that message, and thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.